Now we're going to do the final assembly. So go ahead and do a part assembly design. We're going to open our parts by clicking the button. It looks like a white sheet with a little arrow, and then clicking product. Click the part you want to open. I open master rod first. Repeat this to open all your parts. You only have to open a part once, and then you can right click on it and select copy, and then right click on product and select paste as many times as you need it. Continue doing this for all of your parts and make sure you copy and paste the right amount that you need. Once you have all the parts you need, you should rearrange them so that you can see all of them, because right now they're all stacked on top of each other. Use the manipulate tool, and you can move it any direction you want. Right now we're moving in the Z direction. And then I just like them when they're all on the same plane, because then it's easier to rotate and view them. Notice I had one extra articulated rod, but we'll get rid of it later. Go into the top view and select XY. This will allow you to move the parts anywhere along the XY axis. You can set it up however you want, but this is how I like to do it. To delete the part, you just click on it and select delete. I like to set it up so that I don't have to really rotate much to find each part that I need to connect. After you laid everything out, it's time to start assembling. First, we're going to connect the piston to the master rod. The first step is to put the rod bush upper inside the master rod. So we're going to click inside of the master rod circle and outside of the rod bush upper and select surface contact. It didn't do anything, but that's okay. Next, we're going to do a coincidence constraint. So select the top of the master rod and the top of the rod bush upper and select the coincidence constraint. And then once you click update, it'll move inside. We're going to use the same process with the contact constraint for the rod bush upper and the piston pin. Next, we're going to use an offset constraint. So click the top of the rod bush upper and the top of the piston pin and click offset constraint and offset it 19 millimeters. Click update and you should see that it goes in and sticks out 19 millimeters. Now we have to connect the piston to the piston pin. We have to use 3 constraints for this. First, we're going to select the inside of one of the circles of the piston and the piston pin and select contact constraint and do the same thing for the other side. Now we have to do another offset constraint to the outside of the piston and bottom of the pin. You can choose to do it either side because the parts are symmetrical, so just pick the sides that are facing you. Select them both and select offset constraint. The offset for this is 2.5, so type that in and click update and you see it updates properly. Now we have to put the piston pin plugs inside the piston pin. We're going to zoom in a little bit. Too much. There we go. And select the inside of the piston pin and the outside of the piston pin plug and do a contact constraint. Next, select the top of the piston pin and the bottom of the wide part of the piston pin plug while holding control down and do a contact constraint. And I'm going to move this so you can see it, and we hit update and it fits perfectly in. We're doing the same thing to the bottom. This one's easier because you don't have to rotate. Select the inside and outside and do a contact, and then the top of the piston pin and the bottom of the piston pin plug and do a contact and update. Now the piston is fully connected to the master rod. We have to now connect the piston rings to the piston. Select the inside groove of the piston and the inside of the piston ring and do a contact constraint. Then select one of the sides of the grooves and the side of the piston ring and do another contact constraint and update it. Repeat this for the rest of the piston rings. The next thing we're going to do is use the manipulate button to rearrange all the constraints we just made. Just move them any direction you want, rotate, keep moving them wherever you want to. Now click the update button. Everything should go back, but you see that the piston isn't aligned properly with the master rod. That's because we didn't make an angle constraint. To make the angle constraint, select the axis that lies along the master rod and the axis that lies in the piston, and make sure it's in the XY plane. Type in 0 degrees so they line up, and select update, and now it's fully constrained. Attaching the piston is the same when it goes onto the articulated rods as well. We're going to manipulate it to make sure it updates correctly. And when we hit update, we see that it doesn't because we didn't do an angle constraint. We're going to do it differently this time. Select the side of the articulated rod and the bottom of the piston, and then select angle constraint. Make the angle 90 degrees so that they're perpendicular to each other and select update. Attaching the rest of the pistons is exactly the same as this one. Now that they're all connected, we're going to connect the rods to the master rod. The first thing we have to do is insert the rod bush lower into the articulated rod. Select the inside of the articulated rod and the outside of the rod bush lower and do a contact constraint. Then select the top of the articulated rod and the top of the rod bush lower and do an offset constraint. This offset has to be 2 millimeters. When you hit update, you see that the rod bush lower sticks out a little bit, and it should be on the inside. Just double click on the 2 and change 2 to -2, and click update, and you'll see that it's in the inside now. Now we have to make a constraint between the master rod and the articulated rod. It doesn't matter which side you use as contact constraints because the parts are symmetrical. So to eliminate the need to rotate the part around, just select the sides that are facing you and do a contact constraint. And now rotate the part to see the bottom and do the same thing. Select the bottom of the articulated rod and the top of the master rod and do a contact constraint. Now we have to do a coincidence constraint between the hole in the master rod and the hole in the articulated rod. We want to choose the hole for the articulated rod and not the rod bush lower, just to keep things consistent. And use a coincidence constraint and click update. Now to put the link pin inside the hole, select the inside of the hole and the outside of the link pin and do a contact constraint, and then select the top of the master rod and the bottom of the link pin and do another contact constraint. And select update and it goes in. Repeat this for the other rods. But you'll notice when we do this that something changes. When you click update to put the articulated rod in the master rod, the piston head changes directions. In order to change this, all you have to do is rotate the part so you can see it, and then double click on the 90 degrees and change it from 90 to -90. Select OK and click update. And this will turn the piston around so it's facing the proper way. Connecting all of the articulated rods to the master rod is the same. So we're going to skip over that and get to this part where if you click update, the articulated rod goes through the master rod. In order to fix this, just use the manipulation button and click the axis of the link pin and rotate the articulated rod around in a circle. Select OK and select update and it should work. We're almost done. Now we have to attach the master rod to the master rod bearing. So select the inside of the master rod and the outside of the master rod bearing and use the contact constraint. And then the top of the master rod and the top of the master rod bearing to use a coincidence constraint. And select update. Now all we have left to do is to set the angles between each piston. So use the angle constraint and select the axis of the master rod piston and the piston to the left. And that angle is supposed to be 70 degrees. But notice when we type in 70 and update it, that the angle that it chose as 70 is not the angle that we want. It shows the angle that's 180 degrees minus 70. So type that in for the constraint definition and select OK and update it and it'll update properly. The easiest way to look at this is if you go in the top view or look at it from the top somehow. We're going to do another angle constraint between the next piston and the piston after that, and that's not at 70 degree end. If you do like before and type 180 minus 70, it won't give you the right angle because this time it's measuring something different. It's actually measuring the proper angle, so double click on the angle and type in 70 and click update. And now repeat this twice for the next two pistons. We don't have to do the last piston and the master and the piston connected to the master rod because that will just over constrain it and it's not needed. So next we're going to use the manipulate tool and move everything around, any direction, any position. And once we've done that enough, we're going to click OK and then click the update button and it should all go back to place. And that's your final product.